Hello everyone, Miss Carol here in the museum on Faith Boulevard, and we're so glad you joined us today. Hope you're enjoying these lessons on the plagues, and we're just going to jump right in because we've got some exciting news to share with you at the end of this video. So let's go ahead and get started on those plagues again, those disasters that God is bringing down on the Egyptians. And if you remember last week, the one we left with was the lice or the gnats that when Moses or when Aaron struck the dust of the earth, it just gnats everywhere, right? And if you remember, there was a difference in that plague than the ones before, because if we go back to chapter 8 and we look at verse 18, it says, "But when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, they could not. And the whole nation was covered with the gnats." And here's what the magician said. This is the most important verse, I think. The magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." All right, so they knew their idols, their gods, were not going to help at all. They couldn't do a thing. This was a true God doing this. But Pharaoh's heart was hard and he would not listen, just as the Lord had said he was going to do. All right, so let's just keep moving along then. And if you know your plagues, you know what comes next. So the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Get up early and go down to the Nile River." When Pharaoh shows up, obviously this is his routine. He goes to the river every day, probably to bathe. And so he says, when he gets there, you say again, "Let my people go. And if you don't, I'm going to send swarms of flies all over the land. And they're going to be in your houses. They're going to be covering your ground. They're going to be on your animals. They're going to be everywhere." But God says something differently this time. So in verse 22, he says, "But on that day, I will deal differently with the land of Goshen, where my people live, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. I will make a difference between my people and your people. This miraculous sign is going to occur tomorrow." And in other words, God is saying, "Okay, Pharaoh, I'm going to prove to you that this is my doing. This isn't an accident that these flies have come. It's going to be me. Because my people up in Goshen, they're not going to be bothered by any flies. Just your people, Pharaoh." And so, just as promised, the Lord did it. And it says, dense swarms of flies poured into Pharaoh's palace and into the houses of his officials. And throughout the land, it was ruined by the flies. And now Pharaoh summons, that's what a king can do. He can send an order that you have to come before him, and he orders Moses and Aaron to come before him in his palace. And he says, okay. All right, so he's going to bargain a little bit here. "Go sacrifice to your God, but stay here in the land when you do it." And Moses says, "That's just not going to work. I'm sorry. We need to leave to go and do this, because we'll be offering sacrifices which your people will just find disgusting, and they won't want any part of it. And they might even try to kill us. No, we're going to need to leave." And so Pharaoh says, "Okay, I will let you go to offer sacrifices." And this is in verse 28, "To the Lord. But you must not go very far into the desert." Okay, so he's still bargaining. You can't go 3 days out into the desert, but you can go into the desert. Okay, now pray for me. So he's learned, if he says, okay, then pray for me. And so Moses says, all right, when I leave here, I'll pray to God. But here's this verse. "Only be sure that you do not act deceitfully." In other words, that you're not lying again by not letting the people go to offer the sacrifices. So Moses left Pharaoh and he prayed to the Lord, and the flies were gone. But this time, here we go, Pharaoh hardened his heart, and he would not let the people go. But he's learning a little something, isn't he? If I say yes, then maybe, and then I can say no as soon as they're gone, can't I? So those two gods that the true God was trying to show them are not real was this God that he's got, that is a beetle for a head. Now, would you want to worship a beetle? Do you think a beetle could ever do anything for you? I don't think so, but his name, I think, was Kepri is how you would pronounce it. And he was supposed to be another god of creation. And it also would be attacking Renenutet, which was the goddess of nourishment and harvest. All right, so everything was destroyed, right? Where was she when all this was going on, and why didn't she use her power? Because she has none, right? All right, so now we come to the next plague, and that's going to be the death of the cattle. Remember, disease of the cattle. All right, so go to Pharaoh, God says, and you tell him, if he doesn't let my people go, I'm going to cause this disease to come over all the livestock, and they're all going to die. Now, we're talking about horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, goats. They're all going to die. And Pharaoh doesn't listen. And God says, but I will make a difference between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of the Egyptians, so that no animal belonging to the Israelites will be harmed. Okay, so he's telling Pharaoh, I'm showing you again, this is just on you. It's not on my people. I'm protecting my people. I am a true God. And so the Lord set a time, and he said, tomorrow this is going to happen. I think maybe he's doing that to give Pharaoh a little bit of time to stop and think. Do I really want to refuse this time? Do I really want to destroy my land just because I'm so stubborn? Or am I going to say yes? So he had a whole day to think about it, didn't he? What do you think he did? He just ignored it. That's what he did. So chapter 9, verse 7, just before in 6, said, all the livestock of the Egyptians died the next day, but not one animal of the Israelites died. And so this is an interesting verse in verse 7. So Pharaoh sent men to investigate. In other words, he's going to go spy. He wants to go see. And found out that not even one of the animals of the Israelites had died. And yet his heart remained stubborn. He was not going to give in to the Lord. Can you imagine? He's killing his people and his land, isn't he? Because he's so stubborn. And this, the attack of the cattle, the cows and the livestock. Hathor was an Egyptian goddess, and she had the head of a cow. All right, where was she when the cows all died? And then we have Apis, who was also a god of strength, and he was a bull, okay, or a calf. Now, we're going to come across that again, that god of the Egyptians. We're going to learn a little bit more about that god that they worshiped later on in a place you wouldn't expect to find it. All right, so the cows all died. And so this time, the next one, God isn't even going to give Pharaoh any warning. He's not going to give him a chance to say, okay. He's just going to do it. He just told Moses. And now we're going to find out, too, that Moses is now going to be the one that is the one God's talking to instead of Aaron. You remember when Moses first said, okay, but I don't want to do the talking when he told God? Well, now he's going to do the talking. So something has changed with Moses, and he's either gotten braver or more confident or something, but now he's going to be the one that strikes the land or whatever. So God tells them, I want you to go to a furnace. I want you to take ashes from the furnace. And I want you to go before Pharaoh and throw those ashes up into the air. And when you do, it's going to cover the whole land of Egypt. And it's going to cause, and this is so awful, big sores called boils to come over all the people. It's going to cover the people. Can you imagine how horrible that would be? And so Moses does this. He goes before Pharaoh, throws that soot or the ashes up into the air. And here's what happens. And they took the soot from the furnace, stood before Pharaoh, tossed it into the air, and the boils broke out. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils that were on them and all the Egyptians. So here's Pharaoh in his palace, and here's all his officials. And now they have to leave. They can't even stand before him because they're covered with these horrible sores. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. Now, God isn't making Pharaoh do something that he doesn't want to do. I believe that Pharaoh is already stubborn, and what's happening is every time God shows your gods are nothing, I'm the only God, it just makes him so mad that he just gets worse and worse, right? All right, so now his own magicians, and not only that, but his priests that go into their, I showed you pictures of their temples, their grand temples. Now the priests can't even go into their temples to offer sacrifices to these gods and beg them to help them. They can't even do that because they're all covered with this disease, so they're not allowed to do that. All right, so God's really getting them in the places that hurt them the most. But you know, this is the first time that God has sent a disease or a plague that actually affected the people instead of just the animals where they were. Now, here's a god that he would have been attacking for these boils. Isis, again, one of the very important goddesses, but she was the goddess of medicine. Okay, where's some medicine to make these boils go away? They didn't have any. And Serket was also a goddess of medicine and magic, but she couldn't produce any magic, could she? No. They had no magic, nothing they could do. All right, so now God's going to give Pharaoh a chance this time. He's going to give him a warning. Get up early. Go to Pharaoh, Moses. And this is in verse 13. And this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. You tell him this. Let my people go so they may worship me. Or this time, oh boy, this time I will send the full force of my plagues against you and against your officials and your people. And here's why he said I'm going to do that. So you may know there is no one like me in all the earth. So I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to sock it to you now, okay? For by now, listen to this one. For by now I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with a plague that would have wiped you off the face of the earth. He's saying, all right, you think these are bad? I could have just poofed you right off the earth if I'd wanted to a long time ago. I'm trying to give you a chance, Pharaoh. But I have raised you up for this very purpose, that I might show you my power and that my name might be proclaimed throughout all the earth. In other words, he's telling Pharaoh, the only reason that you're Pharaoh is because I put you there. I wanted you to be the Pharaoh for this very time. Wow, because the Pharaoh thought he was a god. And now this God is saying, no, you're not a god. You're only on that throne because I put you there. And so he says, here's the thing. This is going to happen tomorrow. And I'm going to give you a chance. Now, if you're smart, everybody will bring in, you'll bring in your slaves, you'll bring in your animals, you'll bring in everything and put them under some shelter, because tomorrow I'm going to send a hailstorm. And this is what he says. I will send the worst hailstorm that has ever fallen on Egypt from the day it was founded until now. Give an order. Tell everybody to bring their livestock in. If you don't, they're going to be dead. Now, some, it says in verse 20, those officials of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord. Okay, so some of them are actually turning over to the side of the Lord. They're thinking, okay, our gods aren't doing anything. I don't think they're real, but this God is real. Okay, we better listen to him. They hurried to do exactly what Moses said, and they brought their animals and their people in. But those who ignored the word of the Lord, they left everything out in the fields. And so then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward the sky so that hail, hail is big pieces of ice that fall down. We've had hail here lots of times, haven't we? So that hail will fall all over Egypt on the people, on the animals, and on everything growing in Egypt. So Moses stretched out his staff toward the sky, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and lightning flashed down to the ground. So the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. Hail fell and lightning flashed back and forth. It was the worst storm in all the land of Egypt since it had become a nation. Would you be scared? I would be under a bed somewhere. I would be scared. I wouldn't be coming out of my house at all. And throughout Egypt, hail struck everything in the fields, men, women, everybody, and it beat down everything that was growing in the fields. It stripped every leaf from every tree. Wow. The only place, though, get this, the only place it did not hail, guess where that was? The land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived. Then Pharaoh, he summons Moses and Aaron, get here to the palace now. So they say, this time, guess what he says? Okay, this time I have sinned. Oh, he's saying he's did something wrong. The Lord is the right one, and I and my people are in the wrong. Oh, that's interesting. Pray to the Lord, for we've had enough of this hail and thunder. I will let you go. You don't have to stay any longer. Okay, all right. So Moses said, all right, when I leave, I'm going to pray to God. And the thunder will stop and there will be no more hail. So you'll know that the earth is the Lord's. But I know that you and your officials still do not fear the Lord God. So Moses left. He raises his hands to the sky and he says, stop. God, stop it. Then, guess what? When Pharaoh saw that the hail and thunder had stopped, he sinned again. And he said, no, you can't go. He is a very stubborn man, isn't he? This would have been directed toward probably Nut, who was the goddess of the sky. She was supposed to be the wife of Geb. He was the one that was the god of the earth and the dust of the earth. And all those gnats came anyway, didn't they? Well, she let all that hail fall, and she was supposed to be in charge of the sky, right? All right, so now we come to the last plague we're going to go over today, which is the plague of the locusts. I meant to get down my big old grasshopper over here. Let me see if I can reach him, because this is no little grasshopper, and they were probably as big as this. All right, so this is the next plague that's going to come down on the Egyptians, but it may be called locusts. Sometimes it's called locusts, and sometimes it's called grasshoppers. And so Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, and they say, okay, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go. If you don't, the ground is going to be covered tomorrow with these locusts. It will eat everything you have left. And it'll fill your houses, and it'll be something that neither your fathers nor your grandfathers have ever seen from the day they settled in this land until now. And then Moses just turns and leaves Pharaoh. And now his officials say to him, how long are we going to let this man keep doing this to us? Go ahead and let the people go so that they can worship the Lord their God. Don't you realize that Israel is in ruins? That Egypt is in ruins. Go get them. Don't let this keep happening. And so they send for Moses and Aaron to come back in. And he says, okay, go worship the Lord your God. But now just who's going to be going? Moses said, we're all going. Everyone's going. Men, women, children, all of our animals, because we don't know what God wants us to sacrifice. We're all going to go. Pharaoh says, ha, the Lord be with you if I let you go along with your women and children. Clearly, you're just bent on evil. So, no, you can, only the men go. Just the men go. That's what you've been asking for all this time, so you can all go in the desert. The men only can go in the desert. And then he says, now get out of my presence. Leave, leave. So Moses and Aaron leave. And Moses stretched out his hand, his staff over Egypt, and the Lord made an east wind blow, and it blew all that day and all that night. And the next day, the ground was black with all of these locusts that were eating up everything in sight, and even getting on in the houses of the people. Never before had there been such a plague of locusts, nor will there ever be again. So guess what? Pharaoh calls them, come in, never mind. Come on back. I've sinned against the Lord your God. This is in verse 16. And I've sinned against you too. So forgive my sin once more and pray to the Lord your God to take this deadly plague away from me. And so Moses and Aaron pray. And God causes a west wind to come, and it blows the locusts, the grasshoppers, out of the country. Verse 20. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not let the people go. Unreal, huh? All right, so there were several gods and goddesses. Seth was the god of storms and disaster. He could have been for the hail too, couldn't he, as well as the locusts. Bastet, she was the goddess of protection. She wasn't protecting anybody, was she? And back to Isis again, the goddess of nature and magic. Once again, nothing. She did nothing, right? All right, so next week we're going to finish up on these plagues, these disasters. And we're going to have a special thing we're going to do next week, and I'm excited about it. It's going to be with your whole family. I think you're going to like it. Now let's go back to, are you practicing the 12 sons of Jacob? And do you now know the poem for the plagues, or have you been practicing that? So we have a solution for how we're going to get a prize and our gift card to you. What we want you to do is go to our website on Faith Boulevard. You're going to need to get your parents to take a video of you saying. You can do both, or you can just do one. If you only do one, the gift card will have to change things up a bit. We need you to do both of them in order to be able to get our big gift card, okay? But what you'll do is they'll take a video, and they're going to email it to, and we're going to send a link down so that you'll know and you can get to it. But it's all in lower letters, lowercase, Faith Boulevard at Beltline Church of Christ, lowercase, .org, O-R-G, okay? So, lowercase, BLVD, Faith Boulevard, BLVD. We're gonna, yes, that's abbreviated. So, Faith, BLVD, at BeltlineChurchOfChrist.org. But you can click to that link and you can see that. And we want those videos coming in. And we're going to keep a list behind us, and we're going to announce names of anybody that's been able to do it. We're going to keep a list, and then we're going to arrange for you all to get your gift cards, okay? So as many, overload us. Just send them on in. We're excited. We want you all. I'm going to be excited to get to see and just to see all of those. That's going to be so exciting. I haven't seen you in so long, and I miss you. Okay, so you keep it up. You study. As soon as you get it, you send us that video, okay? And next week, something special's coming up. You're not going to want to miss it. We love you. Bye-bye.